In this video, we will take a look at the floor framing for our home with a wraparound porch to provide you with a little more information about this type of construction, along with the locations of all of the floor beams and the floor joists. Now, we are using truss joists in this example, along with engineered lumber for all of our beams. And the manufacturers for the truss joists also will provide you with some type of a rim joist material. And as you will notice going through the video, I don't think I have one beam that is not full bearing or sitting completely on top of the wall. Sometimes you will have the beam set back a little bit and then have the rim joist go through. And most of the time, either one of those methods will work for most engineers. And in this video, I will not be going over every single connection for the beams or the joist, because you can always contact the product manufacturer for that information or your engineer. However, I will be providing you with close-ups and a little more information that I might have left out in the previous video. And one of those examples will be the double trimmer set I installed here, and I provided you with two different ways. Here we have a full-length trimmer along with a shorter trimmer. Over here we have two full-length trimmers. And of course the key point will be to have two of those trimmers on each side if you're supporting a heavy load, or even a post or something larger if the engineer needs it. And for those of you who are not familiar with my channel, these are only construction methods that might work. You might need to hire an engineer or contact your local building authorities for permits also. And all of the joists in this example will be 16 inches on center. And another thing I want to point out is that if I moved this wall over, I could make the beam shorter and probably go with a smaller beam if that would work for your particular project. And of course, this beam does need to be in this location to work structurally with the roof. So you're probably not going to have a choice of moving the beam back. However, you might be able to move the wall and have it sit under the beam, and then simply put a structural footing in the floor foundation to transfer that load down to the ground, like we have over here and over here. So you can get a pretty good idea how the beams are supported to create open spaces in the lower floor. Now, if we take a look at this beam here, it's basically going to tie into this beam to create some type of a structural drag in the same way that we will be using this beam here to connect the back of the house from the front of the house. We can use these beams here to connect one side of the house to the other side of the house. And by doing that, we can use some type of a strap to connect the beams together. And for those of you wondering why in the heck this gap is here, that's because this beam here is going to sit on top of the subflooring, and we can use a hanger to support this beam here, along with some straps to connect the beam to the supporting post. And this strap here will attach to the underside of the beam. And keep in mind that this is a small strap. You would probably need a much larger strap to connect the two beams together. So here we have a long drag structural connection that's going to make our engineer happy, along with our joist hangers, again spacing 16 inches on center. And you might consider installing some web stiffeners. And there is definitely more information about web stiffeners at the product manufacturer's website and in their installation instructions. I highly recommend reading the truss joist, whatever joist you're going to be using, the product manufacturer's installation instructions if they have them. And of course, a view of how the rim joist is going to butt up against the beam. Again, the beam is full bearing, sitting on top of the 3.5-inch wall, along with our ceiling backing here. Take a look here where we attached a 2x4 to the top of the wall framing so that we have some backing for our drywall, so we can attach it to this board. Otherwise, our drywall is just going to be flopping around in the air. So another thing you can consider doing on your project. And in some cases, we will need to position the blocks in a certain spot to work with our subflooring. And you can see here where the subflooring is sitting half or centered on top of the block. so that we can install the next subflooring to create a nice solid connection between the two floors or two sections of the floors. And I went ahead and ran these joists a little bit longer. I like doing this. However, you can always stop them here if that's going to work better for your project. And again, you can see here where we get a nice clean and smooth transition in these two sections where the subflooring, plywood, or OSB is switching directions. And of course the plywood switches directions because the joists are switching directions. And here's another thing you might want to do, and that would be to extend the beam if you have a little bit extra to spare on the beam. If not, you could always stop the beam over here. If, for example, you had like a 14-foot beam and this is where the 14-foot section ended. And I've been doing it for years. There's no need to order longer lumber to make something like this work. Just simply run it past a little bit so that you can get a little more bearing on the walls. And you can see here where I would have a difficult time attaching the hanger to the top of the beam if I stopped it even with the edge of the wall here. And that might not be that big of a deal. You could just simply adjust the layout to compensate. And again, another view of the long structural connection from the front of the house to the back of the house. And basically we're going to have something similar to it right here. And we're going to use another strap to connect the wall framing to the beam, along with some building hardware to connect the beams to the wall framing or even the other beams. And you can always use stronger connectors, and an engineer might actually call out for different connectors. Keep that in mind. And this beam will help tie this wall together so that we get a nicer connection between the sides here, even though that is not going to be the case right here. Our stairway is going to create a problem for a connection that's going to run all the way through. And of course that might require additional structural reinforcement. So again, the joists changing directions, and if you have extra lumber, you can butt the joist up against the other joist or stop it at the end of the wall. And of course, our ceiling backing, again, we can use a 2x6 instead of two 2x4s here, if of course that will work for you. Everything in this video is just a suggested method of assembly. And if for your particular project it's going to work better to do something else, then I would say go for it. And with that said, if you have any suggestions about something that might work better, feel free to share those in the comment area. And again, we are going to use our blocks here to provide us with a change in the sheathing direction. And for the most part, this side is the same as the other side. And if you remember, on the other side, this beam was sitting on top of the bay window opening with the large header. And if you do run into a situation where we have the window over a little bit, and it's going to work out better for us to have a solid post under the beam instead of putting a huge header over the window opening with double trimmers, whatever the deal is, think about whatever the reason is. If it needs to stay there, leave it. But if not, sometimes you can simply move a window either to the right or the left of a structural post, a post support, if that's going to work better for your project also. And most truss joists will be fastened to the top framing plates with either 16D nails that might be commons or sinkers or even different sizes. Again, 16-inch on center layout. Another way that you can finish this section here would be to extend the rim joist and kind of use it as a block up to the next joist here. And again, that would be if the lumber lengths allow it. Same on the other side here. Now we have another bay window, 45-degree angle on the joist here. Let's go ahead and take a look at it from the outside. So we have our rim joist. Again, the beam is full bearing, post under it to provide us with a nice load transfer. 16-inch on center joist spacing that you're going to need to put some thought into if necessary. Keep in mind that some of these joists will need to be repositioned for a variety of different reasons: plumbing, heating, and in some cases even electrical. Next up, let's go ahead and install our floor sheathing. The direction of the floor sheathing is going to be running this way Over here, it's going to be running this way. Remember the joist switched directions there. And even though I cut this like this floor sheathing here can simply continue through. It doesn't need to break over here, and it would probably work better if it did continue through, especially if you're not going to have a problem with the stairway. And let's not forget that in this example here, we are going to need an overhang. We're going to need to extend the floor sheathing so that our tread overhang will work. We are going to have a 1-inch nosing or a 1-inch overhang for our stair treads. And that means we're going to need it up here also. And of course, you will need to switch directions here. Now, if you can see here, I don't have the floor sheathing breaking half on the joist or even half on the stringer. This isn't going to be a big deal because it's going to basically be supported by the stringer. And I doubt if anyone's ever going to put their foot over here. However, you can always break it on the joist. I will leave that up to you. So again, the floor sheathing here can continue all the way through if it's not going to create a problem for the stairs. Sometimes the floor sheathing will break over here and you'll need to add a block under the floor sheathing or reposition one of the stringers underneath the break. And if you did something like that incorrectly, you could end up with a squeak in the floor here. And of course, the floor sheathing switches directions only in this area here and the two areas in the front or these sections here. So the grain of the plywood or the OSB is basically going to be running in this direction here, this direction here, this direction here, and it's going to switch in these two directions here. And hopefully some of this makes sense. If it does not, feel free to leave any questions you have in the comment area. And do not forget, this video is part of a playlist. I will have a link to that playlist and the rest of the videos associated with this particular design in the video description box or comment area, or both.